Welcome to the Prepped and Polished podcast, the podcast that empowers you to take control of your education. Featuring weekly interviews with influencers in the world of education, as well as tutoring tips, lessons, and updates. And now, here's your host, Alexis Avila.
Welcome back to the Prepped and Polished podcast. Be sure to join our community. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, Google+, Instagram, YouTube. Just type Prepped and Polished and you'll find it. Also go to our site, preppedandpolished.com. Sign up for our monthly newsletter. Have a question during the podcast? Submit your question to radio@preppedandpolished.com. Today's guest is Elly Swartz, the essay advisor. Elly is an experienced writer and author of dozens of articles for both the Journal of Legal Ethics at Georgetown University and for Teen Life Media, and has over a decade of experience helping hundreds of students gain acceptance to America's best colleges, grad schools, and independent secondary schools. Elly received her BA with honors from Boston University and JD with honors from Georgetown University. Elly's company, The Essay Advisor, helps students with the school application process, particularly focusing on the application essay. From brainstorming to editing to hitting send, Elly Swartz offers a custom-designed, personalized approach that best ensures your son or daughter will get into their top-tier school. On today's episode, Elly talks about her key tips on how to start, write, and revise a fantastic college admissions essay. Elly, thanks for coming back on the Prepped and Polished podcast. How are you today?
I'm great. Thanks for having me, Alexis.
Great. Can you remind the Prepped and Polished community about your company, the Essay Advisor, and how do you help students with the school essays and school application process?
Sure. I help families navigate the college process. I do everything from brainstorm to send, which means with regard to the essay, I help brainstorm, outline, edit the essay, help the student find their voice and share their story. I also can help with the activities resume, staying organized throughout the process and on task, give the children tips on making the most of their college visit, and what to do once you hit send. As an author, I find myself in sort of a unique position to help students find their voice and tell their story. And as a mom of a college student and a recent college grad, I feel like I really can identify and relate to the stresses that can accompany the process. So I feel like I'm in a unique position to help the families. And in addition to helping the students, I'm always there for their families. My motto is do not stress alone, whether you're a parent or a student, and that I've got your back through the process. So I'm available to my families pretty much 24/7 until they get their yes.
That's amazing. Now, you mentioned that there have been some changes to the Common Application Essay. Can you tell us of these changes?
Sure. The change is mostly centered around the Common Application Essay prompts. There are still 5 prompts where a student would select one to write their essay. It would be 250 to 650 words. There was one prompt that was removed, and that dealt with the focusing on their perfect place. And a new prompt was added that discusses describing a problem you've solved or a problem you'd like to solve, and it goes into a little more detail. There are some other small tweaks to the other prompts, but truly these changes don't affect most students. The fact that they've changed doesn't affect most students who are applying now because they haven't seen the other choices. So the choices that are available to them are this is the only time they'll be using them. So they have the 5 prompts. They're a broad array, and they'll be able to find one that they can share their story.
Gotcha. And what do you find students struggle with the most when writing their college admissions essays?
That's a great question, and I have to say it's a pretty easy answer. What to write about is the number one problem that I find students have when they come into my office. They feel nothing has happened to them. Mm-hmm. They feel that they need a big story, or they have to have overcome something major in their life to have something to share. And that's not true. It's often the slivers of moments that are the most impactful. I've had students talk about the first time they launched a model rocket with their dad, or one avid reader who figured out how to rig a book in the shower because she didn't want to put her book away, or another who talked about the way he felt the first time he sat behind the wheel of his grandfather's old Buick that still smelled like his Old Spice. I mean, sometimes it's really just those small moments. It doesn't have to be something that you've overcome to really share who you are.
That's amazing. What's the best way to start your college admission essays?
There are basically 4 components, the way I see it, to the college essay process. Those are organization, brainstorming, writing, and revising.
Okay.
So as far as organization, it's basically timelining your process. So the first goal is you want to walk into your day 1 of your senior year with your common application basically done. The second is looking at the colleges on your list and seeing if they have supplements and finding out what those are and how many you'll have to do, and then organizing in a timeline. As far as your listeners go, they want to know more about timelining. I'm happy to have a discussion with them about a way to stay organized. But organization is the first approach, and the second is brainstorming. It's great to create an idea bank at the beginning of the process so that every time you go to tackle an essay, whether it's the Common App essay or another essay, a supplemental essay that you have to do, you are not starting at ground zero. You actually have a bevy of ideas from which to work. And the way you create a brainstorm, the way you create an idea bank is interviewing parents or a trusted adult, asking them things about the way you were in middle school, or what was your favorite food, or what did you love or hate, or what were you most scared of or most determined about, what was hard for you. What's the one story that they would want to share with an admissions officer? And in addition to the interview and ideas that come from that, look through your old photo albums. There's so many memories that can be jogged by looking at old pictures, and really just thinking about who you are and writing down these stories. Brainstorming is not it's really not a time-heavy part of the process. You can write these down while you're on the T going to work, while you're waiting for your little sister to finish her dance recital. I mean, you can write these down anywhere, on your phone, on a notepad, in the computer, and just store them so that when it's time to start writing, which is the third part of the process, you're ready. You've got a bunch of ideas. And then it's time to write. Mm-hmm. So you go back to, you have your brainstorming idea bank, you go back to the essay questions, and you read them over, and you figure out which one resonates with you if you have a choice. And then you begin. And often I tell my students, if it fits with the prompt and the story they want to tell, one way to really engage your reader is to start with a first-person narrative, something short, but that really brings your reader into that moment. Use your senses. What did that moment feel like when you were standing in the rain shooting the model rocket off? What did that moment sound like or smell like when you're in your grandmother's kitchen in Turkey and the spices and the aroma of that moment? Like, what is the emotion of that moment? And use those adjectives and that emotion to bring your reader in. And then, the next tip about writing is to always be positive. Leave your complaints for the dinner table. This is not where you want to talk about what you hated in high school and you don't want in college. I mean, you can talk about your challenges. You can talk about things that are difficult or serious, but you want to focus on how you got up and how you overcame them, not what knocked you down. Mm-hmm. And always being honest and true to yourself. You really want to make sure that this is your opportunity for them to get to know you. So let them get to know you. Really be honest about what you want to share and how you share it. And then just write. Don't censor. Don't go back. Don't think it has to be perfect. This is a first draft. So just start writing. And, it's amazing what the students come up with. And then the fourth prong of the essay is revision. And we can talk about that in a little bit.
Okay. One thing that I was thinking was a lot of students always ask about the word limit. So my question is, should students stay within the word limit, and what is a good length for a college essay?
Those are great questions. So as far as the final draft, the one that you're going to hit send to the college, absolutely stay within the word limit. Part of the reason behind the essays is showing that you can follow directions.
Sure.
So you need to make sure that you're respecting the directions and the prompts that are being given. So as far as your final draft, you should absolutely stay within the word limit. As far as your first draft, when you're actually just writing, as we talked about, don't even think about the word limit. Because sometimes, and I'll give you an example, I'm a writer, and so I write children's middle grade novels. So often when I'm writing, I'll write a first draft and realize that I have to delete the first 20 pages of the story because in truth, my story isn't really starting until page 21. But I wouldn't know that unless I wrote those first 20 pages. So what I tell my students for their first draft is just write, because oftentimes their story is going to start in paragraph 4, but they would have never gotten to those gems if they didn't write paragraphs 1, 2, and 3. So it's easy to cut it down. So for your first draft, the answer is don't worry about the word limit. Worry about getting your story on paper. For your final draft, you should always be within the word limit. And in terms of what's a good length, there is no one good length. It's really let your story, the story that you want to tell, dictate how long it will be. Once your story ends, then your essay's done. And if you have 100 extra words, that's great. And if you have 5 extra words, that's great, as long as you're telling a story that resonates and is meaningful to you.
Wow, great advice. Now, are the supplemental essays as important as that long juggernaut of a Common App essay?
Yes, they are. They're actually very important because the supplemental essays are the time when you as a student can speak directly to a specific college. You can share with that college exactly what you loved about that particular place. And that's why when I talk to my students and give them tips on making the most of their college visits, that's where this comes into play. When you go on a college visit, bring your phone, snap some pictures, jot down some notes so that when you're writing the why this college essay, or you can really be specific about what you loved when you sat in on this Shakespeare class, or you went into the dining hall and had the best pizza you've ever eaten, or there was an organization that you ran into some students and you loved the organization and the students were incredibly involved and really welcoming. I mean, you really want to be as specific as you can because this is how an admissions officer from that school will get to know you in addition to the other essays and your transcripts. They're going to get to know you and really be able to decide if you're a good fit for this school. So they are important.
I love it.
Thank you.
What's a good method for revising your college app essay?
So revision, as I mentioned earlier, is the fourth component to the writing process or getting the essay complete. And I always say, I do this with my own as a writer, I do this with my own work, and I share it with my students. And that is, once you've finished your first draft or a draft that you're comfortable with, read it out loud. It doesn't even have to be to anybody else, but read it out loud. It sounds different. You hear it differently when you're reading something out loud. And then ask yourself 3 questions. Did you answer the prompt? And the next question is, did you stay within the word count? And then finally, does your answer sound like you? Is it what you intended to share? And so you want to make sure when your essay is finalized and ready to go, you are within the word count, you did answer the prompt, and that, in fact, your answer does sound like you, it is the story that you intended to share. So that's where I'd start with revision. And then you want to make sure that you watch out for the big 3 mistakes.
Ooh.
One is spelling. This is the time where you need to take a breath. You're ready to hit send. If you don't have impartial eyes, give it to somebody who does. You want to make sure that you haven't misspelled words. There was a admissions officer that I spoke with who shared with me that there was a student who wrote this incredible essay about tutoring a tutoring experience with a young child. And it was really heartfelt and very emotional, but instead of writing tutoring, they wrote torturing. Now, that is not the kind of mistake that you want in your college application essay.
No.
So take a step back and make sure that you have no spelling mistakes. The second big mistake is tense. Make sure that your writing is in the correct tense. And the third, and possibly the absolute number one mistake that you want to look out for, is do not write the name of the school incorrectly. A lot of students, and this happens every year, who recycle essays or are tweaking essays to use in more than one school, forget to change the name of the school. And they're applying to college A, but in their essay they're saying why college B is the perfect fit for them. Please review your essays. Really have an impartial set of eyes, a parent, a friend, a guidance counselor, a college application advisor. Take a look at them if you feel that you're too close to the writing. And then once you've done those things, I always suggest sharing your essay, again, with somebody trusted, an application advisor like myself, a parent, a guidance counselor, and make sure that you are getting your point across. And then really listen to what they have to say, the person who heard your essay, and go dive back in and tweak it as you need to. And at that point, once you read it again and you review it again, make sure there's no mistakes, you'll be ready to hit send.
What's a good level of participation for the parents when revising the essay?
That's a great question. I mean, the parent input in general, I always believe, is a supporting role. I always say, rock that supporting role. Help them figure out how to do the road trip when you're visiting different schools. If they're studying for the SATs or ACTs or writing their exams, make them their favorite meal or order in their favorite cookies or be there as a support. But this is not the parents' process. So if the parents are reading an essay and they have thoughts about it, ask if the child wants input, and then give some positive feedback first. Let them know that you're proud. Let them know that you understand that this is a hard process to tackle. And then if there's one or two things that you want to share, you don't, as a parent, you should never take the essay and start writing on it or changing it or creating it so that it sounds like it's the voice of a 50-year-old father or mother as opposed to a 17 or 18-year-old child. It's their voice, so you really want to be careful if you're editing. Like you can say, John, there was a spelling mistake, or this is the wrong school name, or did you talked about X, but, maybe you want to think about tying that in at the end. You can give some general guidance, but in terms of the content, what they're writing about, I really recommend that the parents are a support and they really let their children guide this practice. And if, a lot of students have guidance counselors, college counselors at their school, or librarians at their school, or a trusted teacher at their school, or they hire an independent person to help. But, this is a great journey for parents to watch their kids go through. And if they can step back and just watch their kid go from, an 11th grader, second semester 11th grader who's just beginning this process to a second semester senior who is thriving and independent and decisive and so much more mature than he or she was a year ago, that's such a gift as a parent to be able to embrace that and not necessarily be involved in the details of the process. Really leave that to your child and to his or her supports that they have around them.
Really well said. You read a ton of college essays, and I was wondering if there was maybe one that recently stood out to you from the pack, and why?
It's hard to pick. I feel like my students write from their heart, and in that way, each one is very authentic and powerful. So there isn't one essay that stands out. There are a number of different essays that stand out for different reasons. There was an essay that a student had written about coming face-to-face with a wolf for the first time, an essay that a student wrote about overcoming an autism diagnosis, an essay about the power of one of the students' Lebanese grandmother's kitchen and spices and food that they ate and how that made her feel every time she visited. And another was about a Turkish marketplace where a student visited her dad after being separated from him for a long time. Each one of these wove in details using their senses, like we spoke about before, and was very honest in their emotions and allowed the reader to really be brought into the moment that the student was sharing. And to me, that's what makes an essay so impactful. And really, as a writer, that's what makes a story impactful. If you can bring your reader, bring your audience into your moment, if you can share that with your reader, then that is always so impactful and really allows you and your reader to have a shared experience and allows them to get to know you. And so for me, I feel like that's always what is most memorable and what stands out is that honest emotion that's shared between a reader and a writer.
Powerful. So how can we get in touch with you? Remind us.
Many ways. I have a website, which is essayadvisor.com, and that's essayadvisor ends in an er.com, and on that website you can find my email, which is theessayadvisor@gmail.com, and lots of information about what I offer. Also on Facebook is the Essay Advisor has a Facebook page, and I definitely encourage your listeners to like and follow. I post tons of college tips, also scholarships that I find, and all different tips and information about how to navigate the process are on my Facebook page. And I'm on Twitter at the Essay Advisor. So they can reach out to me by email, the essayadvisor@gmail.com. Also on my website, Facebook, message me, Twitter, message me. I mean, my number's on there. I mean, I'm pretty present on social media, so they can reach out to me at any time at any of those mediums.
And also you can work with students on Skype anywhere. So you don't have
Yeah, I mean, you raise a great point. Now with Google Docs and Skype and FaceTime, last year I worked with a student in Kuwait. I worked with students in Wisconsin and Chicago, Illinois, New York, Connecticut, and there was one more. And Maryland. And I work with them over Skype and Google Docs and have a great rapport with them. And it just makes, whether you're in and around the Boston area and I can meet with you personally, or you're around the country or international, now the way social media works and the options, I can have students in anywhere. Distance really isn't an obstacle.
Amazing. So to the teens listening to the podcast today, what would be a take-home tip that you could offer them that they should carry with them as they get ready to write these college application essays?
I would say I have 2 tips. The first is write what is important to you. Do not write what you think an admissions officer wants to hear or your parents want you to say. This is about you. Write what's meaningful to you, and that will be impactful for an admissions officer to read about. So that's my first tip. My second tip would be don't wait to get started. Senior year, the first semester senior year is busy. So use the summer and dig in and try to walk into day 1 of your senior year with a draft of your Common App complete. And I think come September, you'll be very happy that you did. So those are my 2 parting thoughts for teens who might be listening. I mean, really be true to yourself. And when the summer starts, it's a great time to kick the process into gear in full force with regard to the essays and the application.
Awesome. Well, thanks for coming back on, Elly, and thanks for coming on the Prepped and Polished podcast. Appreciate your time, and come back.
I will, and thank you so much for having me. And if any of your listeners have questions, please don't hesitate. They can reach out at any time.
Thank you.
And thank you again.
And this wraps up our show today with Elly Swartz. Go to essayadvisor.com, essay, ADVISER.com, to learn more about Elly's amazing work helping kids get into their schools of choice. And for more of Elly's words of wisdom, go back to episode 44, where Elly talks about the college process as a whole. Go to preppedandpolished.com/podcast to access episode 44 and all of our 72 other podcasts. And remember, episode 73 is coming soon, our next tutoring tips episode, so stay tuned for that one. Thank you for joining us on the Prepped and Polished podcast. Now go out there and take control of your education.